Today, we're breaking down the indictment of former FBI Director James Comey. And believe me, this is a story that has massive implications for politics and law enforcement here in the U.S.
So the whole thing kicked off with this bombshell news that absolutely rocked Washington, D.C. The man who once ran the entire FBI was indicted by a federal grand jury. This all went down on September 25th, 2025, and get this, it was just days before the 5-year statute of limitations was about to run out. Talk about cutting it close.
Now, the indictment itself really boils down to 2 specific felony counts. And what's so fascinating here is that both of these charges stem directly from testimony Comey gave to Congress way back in 2020. So, in a way, his own words are now at the very center of the case against him.
And here's the number you really need to remember when we talk about what's at stake: 5. We're talking about some serious consequences here. If he's convicted on both of these felony counts, James Comey could be looking at a maximum of 5 years in federal prison.
So let's break down what he's actually being accused of. First, you've got a charge for making false statements, basically for allegedly lying to Congress about authorizing an FBI source. And second, there's a charge for obstructing a congressional investigation. Now, as you'd expect, Comey's legal team fired back immediately, calling the whole thing baseless, a political hit job, and they vowed to fight it tooth and nail in court.
To really get your head around this indictment, you have to rewind the clock. I mean, this whole story didn't just pop up out of nowhere in 2025. Nope. It's really the final chapter in a long, long saga of very public, very political, and very controversial events.
And this timeline really lays it all out, doesn't it? It all starts back in the pressure cooker of the 2016 election, with these high-stakes investigations into both candidates. Then you have his firing by President Trump in 2017. Every single one of these moments was like a domino falling, leading directly to that 2020 congressional testimony that is now at the absolute heart of these criminal charges. So you might be asking, where did these specific charges even come from? Well, the core of the indictment is built on the findings from that long-running investigation by Special Counsel John Durham. Specifically, it's all coming from a newly declassified appendix to his final report.
Okay, and a really central piece of the puzzle here, something the prosecution is leaning on heavily, is what the Durham report calls the Clinton campaign plan. Now, according to that report's annex, U.S. intelligence agencies got a tip suggesting there was a deliberate plan from the Clinton campaign to basically create a story tying Donald Trump to Russia. And to back up this claim, the Durham annex points to some pretty specific language from intelligence memos. Take this quote, for example, which is cited in the report. It alleges that Hillary Clinton herself signed off on this idea of using the Russian narrative for a very specific reason, to distract people from her own missing emails.
So the Durham report really doesn't pull any punches. It calls the FBI's actions under Comey a startling and inexplicable failure. It claims the Bureau got these clear warnings about the plan but just didn't act on them, and that instead they used info from the Steele dossier to get surveillance warrants.
As you can probably guess, the moment this indictment dropped, the reactions from all sides were immediate and they were strong.
First up, you have Attorney General Pam Bondi. She put out a statement that really frames this whole thing as a matter of accountability, arguing that this shows a commitment to making sure powerful people are held responsible for misleading the public.
Then you have the current FBI Director Katash Patel, who was even more blunt about it. He directly connected the charges to what he called the Russiagate hoax and pretty much said this is all part of a bigger effort to rebuild public trust in the FBI.
And, of course, President Trump weighed in almost instantly on Truth Social, declaring it justice in America. But on the complete other side of the spectrum, Comey's supporters and a lot of former Justice Department officials were outraged. They've slammed the indictment, saying it's a dangerous politicization of the justice system and basically political payback for the whole Russia investigation.
So let's step back for a second. Why does this all matter so much, beyond just what happens to James Comey? Well, because this story is so much bigger than just one person. It really gets at some fundamental questions about our country's core institutions.
When you get right down to it, this whole case forces a national conversation about things like trust and fairness, and whether the law really is applied the same way to everyone, no matter how powerful or connected they are. That's the real tension at the very heart of this entire saga. And that leaves us with one final, pretty provocative question to chew on. What does accountability even mean when the very institutions that are supposed to deliver justice are the ones at the center of the story?